Up next on Way of the Renaissance Man, why most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes.
Welcome to the Way of the Renaissance Man podcast. This is a show about ideas, personal empowerment, and celebrating the rational life. Our goal is to help each other discover the tools needed to better focus our minds, integrate our thoughts with actions, and live the lives we really want. I'm your host, Jim Woods.
It's often said that more than half of new businesses fail during the first year, but that's actually a bit too optimistic. The fact is, most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. That's the premise and the title of the new book by John Paul Mendocha and Gabe Bautista, two of the nation's leading business consultants. In this episode, John Paul and Gabe joined Jim at his ranch for an intimate dining room conversation about why most businesses are doomed to fail from the start, why it usually takes several years to realize it, and why correct positioning is the real key for anyone who wants to create a successful enterprise. More importantly, you'll find out how and why John Paul and Gabe are both Renaissance men, and why Jim is so excited to share their eclectic backgrounds, experience, and their years of hard-earned knowledge and wisdom about how to properly position your business and your life. If you've ever wanted to learn why some businesses succeed while others fail miserably, then this episode is Positioned to Win just for you. And now, here's Jim's conversation with John Paul Mendocha and Gabe Bautista.
So today I'm in my dining room, and I'm with two of my friends, two very interesting Renaissance men. And they've got something that I think everyone in the audience is going to be very interested in, because they help you make sure that if you have a business, you know exactly how to position that business. So you've heard the old kind of tribe, most small businesses fail after a year. But really, most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. It just takes them a few years to realize that they don't have any more money and they don't have a good idea. So to counteract that, I brought in these two men, John Paul Mendocha and Gabe Bautista. Welcome to the Way of the Renaissance Man podcast.
Thanks, Jim.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Great
Quite an
to be
intro.
here.
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys, this is a first for me because I've never had a podcast in my dining room.
Oh, wow.
No.
Well, and hopefully you're going to be playing some music like a virgin about here. We'll be gentle. We'll be gentle, Jim.
Exactly.
We'll be gentle.
Yeah. I don't let any heads into my house. You know, you got to be book worthy.
Oh,
So,
that's right.
so thanks for being here.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Okay. So let's start off a little bit by we're going to talk about what you guys do and about the book that you've written. Is this book available now? Everybody can buy it.
You can buy it on Amazon Kindle right now. It'll be launched where you can buy the physical March the 17th, 2020. Okay. So after that,
so we're almost there.
Almost there. Man.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just so everyone knows, the book is titled "Most Businesses Fail in the First 5 Minutes," and the subtitle, which I like, is "It just takes 3 to 5 years to realize it. Positioned to Win." Okay.
Yep, it's all about positioning.
It's all about positioning. And I've told this to people, some of my clients and my readers and my newsletters. And people, if you're successful at something in life, you have people asking you, how did you do it? What's the key? This and that.
Yep.
That's always, you guys always get that. I always get that. And many times I don't know what to tell the person in terms of it depends on a lot of different factors. It's like,
Sure.
success, and plus success is how you define it too.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, some people, $1 million a month is not success.
Exactly, yeah.
Some people, a Nobel Prize, well, that's probably pretty successful, but some people that have that are still upset and they say, I'm not at the peak of my thing. So it just depends on what you're doing. But one thing that's key to being successful is to know your position, to know who you are in life. And one of the things that I tell people is find out what you're good at, who you are, and be that damn person all the way. Don't half-ass it. Just be the person. Because if you're not going to be an authentic person, no one else is going to recognize you as that. You can bullshit some people for a while.
Sure.
And maybe for a long while. But eventually you're going to get found out if you're not an authentic person. So let me start by asking both of you, or I'll start with you, John.
Okay.
Okay. So you tell me about your background, because we got similar interests in the in the gaming industry. Tell me about your background, and lead me up to what you're doing now.
Well, the direct version of it is that I taught myself how to play blackjack and moved to Vegas and started playing blackjack. And blackjack is a really tough job. In fact, it's a really shitty job. But I learned a lot, and I was bound and determined I was never going to move back home. And I did that for about a year, and I ran into somebody. And as I started talking to him, and he was an interesting guy, I would call him, we'd call him a mentor, and he'd scoff at that. But he was a part-time poker player and a full-time smuggler. And
you were young too. You were only in your teens, right?
Yep. Went out there when I was 17. Met him when I was 18, and we spent 3 years together. And it was a very fast education. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't get in college curriculum, to say the least. And learned a lot, because I learned about how to be very self-reliant in what you needed to do. And though I hadn't touched on the idea of positioning, because it wasn't in my consciousness, it was just, okay, I knew how to make this stuff work. And then I moved back to the regular world, as I call it, and realized, how do I take what I've learned and apply it somewhere? So I went into sales, because it's an easy place to do that. Worked for my father, bad idea. And this book comes out and I convinced him, he owned a business, I convinced him to read the Wall Street Journal, and in there was the ad for the book, Positioning the Battle for Your Mind. Went out
That's a classic in the marketing industry.
Yep.
And they had a full page ad. McGraw-Hill did. Went out and went to my favorite bookstore.
What prompted you to what resonated with you on that? Because I'm always fascinated by there's key things in I've talked about this in the show a lot. There's key different books, key different people that I've met, key things that for some reason you don't really know exactly why, but they hit you and they resonate with you. There's a lot of other books that were promoted in the Wall Street Journal that year. What was it about that book that got you?
Well, the thing that got me about it was they really talked about knowing, how to know whether you're going to be successful or not, or why something is successful or not. And I had read a whole bunch of self-help books. I'd read a lot of be positive no matter how bad your life is, and do all this other stuff. And most of that I thought was kind of, at best amateurish, really, even though they had sold lots of copies.
Yeah.
And I walked in, and the guy who ran the bookstore said, "I know what book you're here for," and he had already pre-ordered it, knowing that I was going to buy that book, and took that book home, read it 3 times in the first week, went back to my father and said, "We need to position your business. We need to position you."
So that was your consulting, your first consulting gig.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And my father told me that it was bullshit. Well, he read it because he's a precocious reader. Read it and said, "Yeah, this may be interesting, but we're not advertising. This is bullshit, and I don't believe it." Now, fast forward is that I read the book, and I realized that what I need to do is take what I have, position it properly. And my goal was to go sell high tech, because here's what I liked about high tech, and this should resonate with some of your guys out there, is you always want to find markets that are paying people stupid money, and whenever you find stupid money, then you got to figure out, how do I go get big giant containers to go pick up stupid money? And I said, there's stupid money in tech and high tech, because I'd meet people and I'd go, these people are miserable at what, they're just not capable of what they're doing. And yet these people are making a whole lot more money than I was. So I made a couple of hops, we call it in the book pivoting, and started selling high tech. And I was astonished to realize that everybody in high tech had either a technical background or something, and they didn't know how to deal or interact with customers. They didn't know how to interact with large organizations, and there was just this river of money. And within a year of starting the worst thing you could be in that business is to be what's called a manufacturer's rep, which means that you are basically the gum at the bottom of somebody's shoe. That's where you live. And from a year, I actually got moved to California. Now think about how crazy this is. A company hires me. First off, the rules are you never hire a rep to work direct because they're scum. Second is you never move somebody to a territory that they don't know. And the third thing is, you definitely don't do this for somebody who has, less than a year's worth of experience. All three of those things came together. I moved to California. High tech would then turn me into what I knew I wanted to get, which was how do I become a millionaire? Now, I had read lots of books. I had already done, chain letters and MLM, and started.
You try to you have a big resume of things that you knew you didn't want to do.
That was crap. Yeah, and I didn't.
That's the best teacher, though.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. But so what I did was I started selling high tech, and I realized this is great. And as I built my reputation, and then I picked niches inside of niches, and here I've got this book that's really taught me a lot. In that same process, because I didn't know if I was going to get to high tech, I'd actually started doing consulting, because I realized that all I really needed to be was one chapter ahead of the guy I was consulting to,
right?
And I'd be okay. So anyway, I got into that. So what this thing eventually evolves into is that in my lineage, I became the first person to ever become a millionaire. Lost the first million, of course. Went down in catastrophic failure.
Well, that's another big learner too.
Well, yeah, exactly.
There's nothing worse than being on top of the hill and then losing it all, and then coming back. Now I haven't had that experience yet, and I really don't want to, just for the learning process either. So I'm going to learn from your mistakes instead.
Now we're thinking of doing a life experience camp. We take all the money away from you. We
there you go. Take your clothes out. That's what they did to me in the Army.
Exactly.
They threw me in the middle of the North Carolina woods and said, "Come on out. We'll see you in a couple months. Let's see if you can kill this boar."
So what I really discovered is how to actually, because I could go to a company and quickly, make sales happen, make things happen. In one niche, I worked for 5 different companies in the exact same niche. I was the number one salesperson in 3 of those companies, because the other 2 were such duds there was no point in being the number one salesperson. Right. But the end of it,
it was all high tech software. It was software stuff, right?
Hardware and
software.
This
was like mid '80s, early '90s.
'80s to '90s, and then in the '90s, I end up getting what I would consider my last real job, and that is that there was this high tech startup out of. I think your listeners will know this school. They came out of MIT. It's a small school. I used to joke at these guys, because these guys were their nose was so up in the air they couldn't spell their own shit. But anyway, so I started working for those guys, and I became the Evangelist, which was like the world's greatest job title.
Yes. I remember the 90s, that was what, there was all kinds of cool titles that people would give each other, like in the tech world, like Evangelist is one.
Yeah.
Or there would be chief, big kahuna or something like that, of the company, or they try to distinguish it. That was their position.
That was all the hippies getting the corporate jobs.
Yes, exactly. Right? Yeah. Well, it was like the Ciscos and the Oracles and things like that. Those are that was their big growth spurts.
Yeah,
and then of course there was it morphed into Yahoo and Google and all the other things. And it didn't morph into that, but then after that came Microsoft and
I met a guy. He was a chief happiness officer.
Yes.
Yes. What does that mean?
Reminds me of my
He gives out the raises.
I was just thinking of my Vegas days because at the strip club, I met several women who were the chief happiness officers.
Yes, exactly.
But you had to go to the VIP room.
Yes,
but that's a
exactly.
different
You had to
story.
bring a wad of cash. It's funny how money can buy you happiness at those places.
Well, so what I did was as an evangelist, I was able, as I stated, in my mind, it was either the world's greatest job or the world's greatest job search. And because I had this wide open, could do whatever I want kind of thing, I ended up going to all these companies, and it was because everybody asked me on an ongoing basis, right? Because I'm known as Dr. Speed Selling, is that they'll ask me, well, how do you get past the gatekeeper? And I said, well, the best way that I ever found out is I'd call somebody up at Apple or Adobe or Microsoft and say, hey, this is John Paul Mendocha, the Evangelist. We're a spinoff of MIT. We'd like to come over and see you. And those magic words, people go, oh, MIT is coming, right. MIT is coming. And then, of course, I'd show up and they're like,
you don't look like you don't look like a propeller head from MIT. What are you doing here?
I used to have and I still have it, but I had a sweatshirt that said MIT. So what I would do is I'd have, we would have the sweatshirt, and it was crazy. So, but people would love it. Anyway, so because of that, and that was a crazy startup, and I got to do a lot of things. But what I realized is that I could do consulting and do turnarounds, and that's really what I did. Is I took all that experience and getting that fast starts and turned it into really what then defined my life for the last quarter century, which is doing business turnarounds, which is really a fascinating world, and all of that was based upon this whole idea of positioning. Because once you're positioned, so think of it this way. I went out and had some really great coaches that gave me some really bad advice, which was they told me, hey, John, so what are you good at? Well, I'm good at selling. Okay, so why don't you teach people how to sell? So I go to teach people how to sell, find out that, nobody likes to do that because that's like work. And then I did this pivot, and the pivot was, okay, now I'm doing turnarounds. And everybody says, oh, turnarounds, so we need this turnaround, we need that turnaround. Changed the entire mix. And what I actually did was I tripled my fee and made more money, and people go, oh yeah, he's the turnaround guy, and
as opposed to being the sales guy,
and sales trainer guy.
But the concepts you used for sales training were similar to the concepts for the turnaround. It just you branded them different.
Exactly. Positioned them differently, changed everything out. Went out and bought flowing robes and and incantations.
Your guru's incense.
Yeah.
And
the ring.
And what I learned is that all of these sales training guys who are talking about how you have to have everybody find their inner chi and all this other stuff. I'll give all your listeners a real quick way to turn around a company. And I don't know how far out language-wise can we go on this, Guru?
The sky is the limit.
Well, so the first thing you do is you fire all those fuckers, all of them. And business owners will go, but John, if we fire them all, what are we going to do? And I said, well, we're going to see how many of them don't want to be fired. Because if you fire them all, and you have three guys who come up and go, wait a second, you shouldn't have fired me. I shouldn't be fired. I mean, you should have fired all those other guys, but you shouldn't fire me. Mm-hmm. Well, those guys you hire back, right? The other guys who never figure it out, who just pack up their sorry bunch of crap and leave, those guys, you're happy they're gone.
Yeah, you want the fighters working for you. You want the people that, I think this is something that you and I talked about in our personal lives a while back, but you don't want the salesman who is comfortable with his lifestyle. You want that salesman that has an alimony, a big car payment, a big house payment, because he's going to hustle for you every month.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys hanging on by a thread,
Exactly. It's a sense of urgency.
Right.
And that brings up a good point. And I'm not recommending people overextend themselves in their commitments on their life.
Not, yeah.
But that's not a good thing. But you do have to have a sense of urgency, and you have to have some kind of sense of, I need to do this right now in your life. Otherwise, you're not going to do it.
Well, Jim, you've competed as a bodybuilder, right? Yes. I mean, there's a great movie that most people have never seen, but I'm going to say you should go check it out, which is Arnold Schwarzenegger did a movie called Stay Hungry.
Yes, that's a great movie. Jeff Bridges was in that movie.
And and you got to stay hungry. And most of the time, people, I walked in and this guy said, well, I don't really need to be turned around because I've now hit this pinnacle, I've hit this peak, I've hit this amazing thing. And I said, well, where are you at? And he goes, well, yeah, I just broke $5 million in sales after 21 years of being in business. And I'm thinking, wow, okay. At this rate, hopefully you live long enough, you'll see 10 million.
Yeah.
That is not a stay hungry guy. And in fact, that's a very vulnerable guy because that's a person who doesn't understand it. So,
well, there's a saying in the fitness world and in the bodybuilding world too. It's called maintenance is regression. Mm-hmm. So some guys get to a level of muscular development, and they're like, okay, this is all I want to do. Mm-hmm. This is, I'm at the right weight, I'm at the right body fat percentage, So I just kind of coast on my workouts and just kind of maintain what I've got. Well, inevitably they find out that they begin to regress.
Start to go back.
Because what got them to where they wanted to be was a constant push for a little bit extra gain. A little bit, one more rep, one more, 10 more pounds on each side. And in doing that, they got to where they wanted to be. So if they don't continue to do that, they regress. Mm-hmm. And so it's a fact of reality. If you are in maintenance mode, you're in regression mode.
So I'm going to get to where I'm going to hand it over to Gabe here.
Yes, Gabe. Let's talk about you. Because
hang on, I'll get you there.
All right.
So I'm doing this turnaround stuff, and what I realize is that it's very easy in life to become irrelevant, and irrelevancy is that you can become really good at something, but that isn't enough. It's not going to be enough. So when internet marketing really started taking off, I realized that first off, I'm not an internet marketing guy. I'm a marketing and sales and advertising guy. But these guys, even though I've sold more high tech than most of these guys have ever seen, it doesn't matter because I don't fit. So what I did was I started working in that space, and as part of that, what I would end up doing is helping people set up their coaching programs, setting up their sales teams, all in the internet marketing space. And through that, I end up helping somebody in their coaching, and I did all their back-end coaching for a period of years. And I used to do these 15-minute segments. Now, it was ironic because all these people, especially anybody who's listening now, go, this guy can stop at 15 minutes? I don't think. But what happened is that became the bonus material. And what happens is that one day this request comes in and we process it like normal. And I end up getting on the phone with a guy named Gabe Bautista. And we start talking, and that goes pretty well. And he's got another call, and that goes pretty well. And I started talking to this guy, and he says, well, listen, I want to get involved in some of your programs. I don't have enough money. By the way, lots of people say that, but they don't do anything. And he says, look, I'm going to be in LA. And I said, great. If you're going to be out in LA, why don't we get together for breakfast? Now, it wasn't easy to do, but we did. I brought somebody with me who I trust her judgment a lot. She's actually a muse for me because she helps me get stuff out of my head.
We all need those.
Yeah, all need those. And he said, I really want to be part of this. And I said, well, okay, I've got this event coming up, and I'm going to need some help doing the audio, doing this other stuff. But essentially, it's going to be work like a dog, make no money, but hey, you can come and attend. And he did just that. So I'm going to hand it over to Gabe, and you can go on that, because I found a guy who actually would do what he was going to say he was going to do. But I'm going to give the secret of success of writing a book for everybody out there. So it took me 30 years from where somebody told me you got to write a book. So here's the formula. Number 1, take 30 years. Number 2, get yourself a Colombian, which is what Gabe is, and you put those two together, and you end up with a book.
That's right. Easy for you to
I saw that I saw in the write up in your press kit that you said that the key to success is to find yourself a Colombian, and at first I thought it was a misprint or something, but then I realized it's just your personality.
Yeah, that's right.
So, well, because I have a Colombian here in my dining room as we speak, I want to find out about this man. So
yeah, I'm the special guest of the special guest.
There you go.
So yeah, that was a few years ago, and I had come off from kind of a long relationship, and then I ended up living by myself for the first time. And
Were you living in Colombia at this time?
No.
You were in the States, right?
I moved to the States when I was a teenager. My family moved here, and so I basically finished high school here, and did college here.
Okay,
Yeah.
now before we go on to talk about anything else,
Sure.
you have a Renaissance man background that is somewhat similar to mine in terms of your former professional focus.
Sure.
And that is you are a concert level pianist and a composer.
I'm a composer. I don't know if I would say, concert level pianist, but I did, performed and played piano, and, sit around and play, Beethoven and, Bach, and people like go, wow,
Right.
but, that's,
You're quite accomplished, though.
well, I mean, it's a big world in music, and you there's always people out there. So, but yeah, I did a lot of things, and so yeah, my background is I was a composer and a teacher, and so I played a bunch of music, and I taught and I wrote, and so that's what I did before I found myself.
How long did you do that for?
I did that for 7 years. So between the time, so I ended up in college at a kind of prestigious music school in the nation here, and so I ended up doing that for when I said, hey, I like this, so I ended up doing that, and then I got a job at a school at the same time that I was going to school. So and then I graduated, and I just kept teaching for a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
So why did you like go from, or how did you make that transition from being a composer and someone who worked in schools to being someone who helps people build their business?
Sure. So the transition happened because I ended up after that kind of long relationship, I ended up living by myself. I was sleeping on the floor. I was, I had all kinds of years of depression. My dad was an alcoholic, and I went through some bunch of physical abuse and things like that. So finally, by my early 20s, all of that kind of caught up to me, and I was running away from all this stuff.
It always does, doesn't it?
As you try to think, everything's okay, but then, especially, I ended up living by myself for the first time, and so it was like, wow, okay. And I had no money, I had no living by yourself skills, like, okay, now I have to cook, now I have to do all these kinds of things.
Everything was new.
Yeah. And so I actually slept on the floor for over a year. But that's and I went through, crazy depression, attempted suicide, just really dark, probably too long to, kind of go into that, and dark. But what came out of that, though, was somebody who said, okay, well, if I'm gonna get something together, what are the kinds of things that I know I can do? And so one of the things that I've always done, and I've read every day for, I think, as long as I remember, really, because my grandmother was a big reader, and so I said, well, maybe I can do a little bit more of that. Right. And so one of the things that I always read stuff that was kind of in my field, kind of the things that I was doing. But then I started reading stuff about business and things like that, because I was thinking, well, I need to make more money, right? I need to put something together.
There's something about not having a bed or food that prompts one into figuring out how to get a bed.
Oh man, yeah. You start learning
It's
real
an important
quick.
thing to have.
Oh yeah. So I basically told my boss, look, the school is growing, right? So you need help. Not just like teaching and stuff, but like managing the teachers, maybe hiring.
Oh, I see.
Maybe
So you
doing training.
You took where you were working at the music school and said, we could do something more with this.
Yeah, before I knew what pivoting was, and really that was my first pivot, when I went from just a musician, a composer, a teacher, to now being, let's say, an admin, somebody who's also managing, well, it turns out, like, if you read a little bit, and, for example, people always ask me, like, Gabe, how do you know this? How do you know that? You can actually look up the books that are used in most university programs, right?
Right.
So I went through a couple of MBA programs, and I said, what do these guys read? And I just made a big list and I read them all.
Right.
But I didn't think that was, I thought anybody could do that, right? Well, a lot of people don't have the stamina.
Anybody can do it.
Yes.
But even the people in those programs often don't do that.
Yep, exactly. So anyway, so pretty soon I was learning and knowing things about, seeing things in the business that were wrong. I was like, well, this is wrong. You don't do this. You don't do that. And so I started saying, hey, maybe I can help out. So they were my first, let's say, client, right? Until this is another principle of positioning that I learned there, which is nobody's a prophet in their hometown, right? And so, well, they hired this young kid who, out of college, and as a musician, right? And now he's telling them how to do business. They're like, no, we're not gonna listen. So that was exactly. I realized I had to outgrow that, because even if I had the right ideas, right? The principle of positioning is, no, you are known as this guy, not this other guy. If I would have come with with the big flowing robes like the John already owned, should have lent me those, then they would have maybe believed me.
That makes that brings up a really good point. I want to stress, and this is something that I've talked about before. It's very difficult to get out of the mindset of other people once they've pigeonholed you into something.
Yep.
You're like, for a long time, Jim's the stock guy. Jim, he's a stock guy. He knows everything about stocks, and I was proud of that moniker. Sure. Of course, that's true, but I was actually fortunate enough to, when I was very young, high school, college. I mean, people used to call me the Renaissance man because I did a lot of different things, and different things that were disparate, I would bodybuild, like you mentioned, John, and then I would study philosophy, and I'd play piano, sure. And then I would train my horse. They were, well, this guy does a lot of stuff. Sure. And so I got the term Renaissance. So that was actually a branding thing from a long time ago. Yeah. But in professional life, okay, he's a writer. He's a stock guy. Yeah. And no one wants to, once someone sees you as a certain thing, they think to themselves, okay, that's what this guy is. Yeah. That's what that does. And you're right. It's very hard to break that mold. And I think one of the things about your book is not only just the positioning at first, but also the ability to pivot if it's not working.
Absolutely.
Or even if it is working, you pivot to something else and expand your horizons, your business.
Absolutely.
So that's interesting. I always found it interesting because I have a lot of, obviously, musician friends from my days in music. And a lot of them couldn't break out of that I'm a musician mold, and a lot of them didn't want to either.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of them, that was their identity. They still, to this day, they look like they belong on Sunset Boulevard because they're wearing the long hair and they're 50 something years old. But they haven't really grown out of
cool
anything.
Anymore.
Yeah, it's not cool. When you're 22, you're cool. With the looking like Axl Rose. But when you're 52, it's not cool.
It's not as cool. It's less cool.
So it's very exactly. A few guys can pull it off, if you're Axl Rose.
If you're Axl Rose. But then again, your positioning is not the guy with the long hair, but is, I don't know, Axl Rose.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a hard job to get, unless you're Axl Rose.
Very, very hard to do that.
Okay, exactly. So you decided to get into the business world after that. And then you, from what I remember, you basically took it and ran with the whole idea of helping other people with their positioning.
Well, so again, a lot of this was instinctual, right? Just like, John's, I think he also has a very instinctual feel of what positioning is. I realized that, okay, wow, if I'm going to make this drastic change, this is going to have to be, I'm going to have to do this step by step, because this is, you can't just leap to it, right? Again, you're not believed, right? You're perceived as somebody who's trying to do something they shouldn't or can't do. Or
you have to build credibility points along the way.
So, but it was I'm trying to find out, okay, how do I do this? How do I cut my learning curve, right? Because that was the thing. I don't want to wait 10 years to do this. I got to be able to do this in 5. And in 5, I've been able to do it. What I ended up doing is, again, I was doing a lot of coaching, a lot of stuff from anybody that I could, right? A lot of people I didn't learn much from, right? I learned what not to do, let's say, right? But
that's sometimes almost as important.
Yeah, you just keep going.
So you see some bad examples out there. I don't really want to be like that guy. Because there's plenty of those out there.
But lots of them. Yeah. So in one of those coaching programs, again, I ended up talking to John, and then that's when I realized, wow, he's doing a lot of business, more real business stuff that I was doing. At the time, I was doing a lot of agency work. So I worked for agencies doing a lot of digital marketing, internet stuff, digital stuff.
That's one thing I want to ask you about, because nowadays people I know a lot of my listeners, they want to they want a podcast, or they want to do something, they want to build their Facebook presence, they want to build their Instagram presence, stuff. And you learned how to do that early on.
Well, I actually had to learn it because of music. So
yes,
yeah. So and a lot of the music stuff. Again, one of the reasons that I started, okay, well, how can I make more money? Okay, so I started reading all this stuff, but then I was started recording videos of me playing all the different instruments that I knew how to play. So, and I became kind of known around around Dallas as Gabe can play anything. If you need somebody, just ask him, right? So I started playing with all these different bands and everything. So I learned Facebook ads and Google stuff
to market
SEO,
your own music skills. Yeah.
And then that's why that made so much sense. And if I would have known all these concepts, I would have been able to do it faster. But I was kind of trying to put it together. And so one of the things I said, I know how to read. I can do this. And it's if I can do this for myself, I could probably do this for businesses, right? So I started I had a few friends that had local businesses, and I was like, maybe I could do this. And then it turns out I could. I was like, wow, look at that. And then I ended up working with agencies. But then agencies are their own kind of world. But I just kept learning, kept reading, kept going to conferences. If there was a internet marketing, the internet marketing conference that I came to when I told John I was going to be in LA, it was a conference, and I was here to learn as much as I could. And so I was still kind of in that train of maybe if I know how to do this will help me get wherever I need to get to. So that was my next pivot. So I get musician to staff or admin to musician who markets to somebody who markets digitally, right? So I'm spinning that around.
Trying on these different hats and just putting it into increasing your skill levels.
Yep. But I was accepted just because I was kind of in those worlds, and I was just a little bit of a spin. That's why it's called pivot, right? It's a rotation around a center, right? What is your center?
It's not a completely eradicating what you were before and doing something 100% different. It's just changing up the. That's funny because I know, both of you have this experience in life. I had this experience because when I worked a long time ago, when I worked at Investors Business Daily, the newspaper, I was doing content stuff for the paper and writing how-to courses and things like that on the investment books and stuff like that there. But it was right around the mid '90s when the whole digital realm of information became. Oh, yeah. So there was, you guys remember this, I'm sure, there was America Online, there was CompuServe, there was Prodigy, there was these services before there was even really a full-blown internet.
Sure.
And we had sites. We had Investors Business Daily had a presence on AOL, on Prodigy, on CompuServe.
Good for them.
And so, but I was the only one who kind of thought these things were cool and knew anything about them. So they were like, well, you know a lot about this stuff,
Jim.
right? Jim might be doing. So then I ended up in charge of all these projects. And I really didn't know very much at all about it, but I knew more than everybody else in the place there. Hey. So they're like, hey, this guy knows. So I ran with it too. I started learning. I went to AOL in Virginia. I went to CompuServe in Ohio. They trained me on their platforms, and then so I was able to actually use that knowledge later on down the line when I worked for different online publications, websites, and things like that. And I'm still doing that, and it's the skills. It's funny with that industry, the skills morph and are changed so fast. If you know something about digital marketing 2 years ago, you don't know anything. You haven't.
Absolutely.
2 months even is
I remember this recruitment company was trying to hire me a couple of years ago. And so they said, well, you need to have, I think they wanted 3 years of experience in Google Data Studio. Just Google Data Studio is basically it's like a kind of a way you can display a bunch of data about. You can grab it from Google Analytics, from Google AdWords, from all these different places, and you can display it because the board really likes to see those graphs, all that stuff. So I told the guy, well, actually, I only have, there's nobody in the world that has more than 3 months of experience in Google Data Studio because they just redid their whole thing 3 months ago, right? So even the recruitment company, even the company, they don't really even know exactly how long these things are going on because having a lot of experience in in something like that changes every 6 months, well, that's as useful as having experience cutting grass that's only an inch tall, right? It's like, well, who knows? We'll just cut it, right? So it's exactly that.
Yeah,
And I think there's an important point for the audience, for your listeners, is that lots of times I meet people who feel a little bit left out, like, hey, the trend has already happened, I'm behind it.
Yeah.
And what they need to realize is that there's another trend coming.
Always.
And in fact, that next trend that's going to come, you need to be in the mix now and really swim as hard and fast as you can to catch that next wave.
Yep.
And yet they'll sit there and tell me, oh, yeah, this is all said, it's all done. Gabe and I have mutual friends who will tell you about how, they just remind me of my father, who would tell me about how a candy bar was a nickel. And then they'll sit there, but their version of it is and you'll love this, Jim, because I know some guys who are early on in Google, and they'll say, oh, remember when a Google click was a nickel? And I'm saying, and what I do when those guys piss me off is I go buy them a candy bar, and I go, listen, my father used to say candy bars used to be a nickel. There's your nickel click. Now shut the fuck up, man. Deal with what you got now.
Well, that's true. I mean, and
come on.
I think, this if you broaden that out to a national, and like the national debate that's going on right now, you hear people talking about, oh, we're exporting American jobs, or there's we have to manufacture things again in the U.S. because we want some good blue collar jobs and coal. Well, guess what? It's not a political decision that those jobs aren't here anymore. Yeah. It's just a matter of economics, and people can do those jobs have been outsourced by efficiency. And it's you can't sit there and grab back the situation of 50 years ago, 30 years ago, even 4 years ago. Things don't work that way in the world. So if you want, we'll bring it back to the Renaissance man concept. Being a Renaissance man knows that there's always a new birth, a rebirth, a renaissance in every industry, in every area. And if you want to be part of the renaissance in your industry, you have to make sure you read all the time, like you were saying, Gabe. Be a voracious reader. Be someone who wants to learn how to do things. Be an asset to your company because you're the guy. Hey, like Jim knows about this.
Yeah.
Be that person.
Absolutely.
Don't go, oh, I wish things were like they used to be. And the good old days were like, well, we could just do this and this and buy the candy bar for a nickel. Well, guess what? That shit doesn't fly. You have to be the guy who's like, hey, I know how to build a better mousetrap next year.
Yeah.
And then you bring it to your people.
There are markets right now that are going through that phase that John is talking about. There are markets right now that, well, maybe not a nickel. Some of them actually a nickel, but 20 cents, 30 cents of a click right now. But people are missing them because they're complaining about the things that they missed before. So the question, my version of that is, the question is not, I wish I knew then what I know now, which is what everybody always says.
Right.
The question is, what am I still missing now? That's what we need to find out constantly, right? There's a reason.
That's the hard part, though, because it's not easy to know what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And so how do you go out and find out what is it that you don't know? Well, you have to be in places that are uncomfortable, right? Because so when you feel uncomfortable, what your body's saying is, I don't know what's about to happen. I don't know. Right? Well, now you're in a position to discover something because by definition, you are somewhere that you don't know where it is. This is the reason why reading and really listening to somebody is difficult, because if you're actually taking in information, right, from somebody, this is also the same reason why psychotherapy works, is because when you're actually taking that in, you cannot help but change. Right? And change is, well, it could be dangerous. It can be dangerous. It's not just
it can be dangerous, but it's the only way to grow.
Exactly. And so the problem is that we think that not changing is safety and changing is dangerous, or at least not think, but feel, let's say. It's a very embodied.
Well, the human is reluctant to change because we're a stasis-oriented organism.
Well, I mean,
no one wants to push themselves at the gym. No one wants to push themselves and learn something new that's hard. It's hard. Oh, it's hard. Yeah. Oh, it's hard. Okay. I mean, and it is.
Sure.
But that's the only way you grow. And I mean, I always encourage people if you want to increase your level of skill, if you want to increase your level of happiness, do stuff that you suck at. Try it. That's one of the reasons why I've been able to do a lot of different things, because people say, oh, you're good at a lot of different things. How'd you get all good at that? Well, I started out sucking at them and I just didn't stop, because it didn't feel good to not know how to ride a horse.
Yeah.
But now I could teach everybody else out there how to ride a horse.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't feel good not knowing how to write an article. Now I write 5 articles a week, and I didn't know how to pick stocks when I started, and I lost money. But now I'm making people millions of dollars with my newsletters because I learned how to do it.
Yeah. By the way, for all of your listeners, you've shown us the dartboard and the blindfold and the darts.
Yeah, you know my process now.
We've seen it now, man. I am buying the blindfold. I am going to do it.
That's right. Well, you got to get a specific type of blindfold. You can't just go off the rack.
Oh God, yeah. Jim's got a custom one.
Spin around 5 times.
Well, and I want to point out something really important. So if you're going to read a book, and I got this actually from my guy that I learned so much from in Vegas. So I show up and I'm this guy who's just like way over the top, not sedate like I am today. And, he sits there and he says, hey, I'm going to give you this book about poker. So he gives me this book about poker. And, it was the basics of poker. And I read the book, bang, just go through it. And I come back and I start telling him all the things I already knew. And he looks at me and he says, listen, I guess nobody ever taught you how to read a book, which really pissed me off. And he goes, no, look, I didn't ask you to go through the book and find all the things you knew. I want you to read the book and find all the things you didn't know and incorporate those into what you know. And that has stuck with me. I've worked with so many coaching clients and I've said the same thing, is find out what you don't know and incorporate that into your knowledge base and grow that out. Because you taught yourself how to or you learn how to ride, and then you learn how to teach people how to ride. It's the same kind of thing. You have to know what you don't know and experience it, and then get better at it, and then come back through it again, and be willing to be, if you will, not big ego that you're going to do it perfectly the first time.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be willing to suck at things. That's why I call it, because people understand, I can't play guitar. I suck at guitar.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's because maybe you haven't actually sat down and practiced your guitar. Not sit in front of the TV and mess around with some chords, but actually sit down and practice.
Yeah.
Learn your scales. Learn why it's a G chord. Learn how the different permutations of a G chord.
Exactly.
You have to know the theory behind it too. Why is it? What does G major mean? You don't know that, then you're just playing around and putting your fingers in a certain place. Yeah. Okay, so one thing that I want to make sure we talk about is your book, because this book is something that I'm excited about. And I want to cover it. I want to cover the details of it. I want you guys both to chime in, whoever wants to chime in first. So here's the thing. Okay. So the main heading, the subheading is why, or the heading is most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes. Okay.
Just like that.
So why do most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes?
Well, frankly, because in the first 5 minutes you make the initial and most important assumptions that set everything up. And the most important assumption is your positioning. Now, a lot of people conflate positioning with branding. Branding is kind of the word these days that is used. When I sometimes describe the things that I do, people say, "Oh, you mean branding?" And no, we're not talking about cow branding, right? Cattle branding, right? Not that kind of branding. But branding is kind of the outward expression, right? But positioning is the strategy. Branding is, let's say, the tactics, right? Branding is the logo, the color scheme, the fonts, the things that cue you into the position. But the position is
position has to be there before the brand. The
Absolutely.
position dictates the branding, not the other way around.
absolutely, and it's something that is not unilateral, right? It's the position. You need to figure out how you fit into, let's say, a market or a company or a category, right? And so it's both. It's really about you and where you fit in. It's both. It's contextual, right? It's kind of like, well, what is the meaning of a word? Well, the meaning of a word is not contained in the word. It's not contained in the letters.
There might be a definition of the word, but it's also contextual too.
I mean, how sometimes you look at the definition of a word. How many? Is there more than one definition? Absolutely.
Yeah. Or I mean, you could say something like let's define a broad concept like war.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a big, broad concept. There's a conflict between two groups or anything.
Sure.
But how many different contexts is there where war? There's been world history has had hundreds of thousands of conflicts.
Yeah.
And so what's the context of what you're talking about?
It could be a pillow war, right?
Exactly. Well, it could be a war for your brand and your positioning.
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
Absolutely.
There's always a war going on in your position.
Exactly.
And the reality is that people look at whatever they're going to do, they get excited, and what they don't ever figure out is, okay, here's what I want to do, and I'm really excited. And they do it in the context as if there's not a lot of other people out there, where they say, we're better. Well, okay, how are you going to prove that? So the way I like to, quick insight is that we all know that coffee was invented in 1971, because before 1971, there wasn't Starbucks. And Starbucks, the way I like to think about it, and since we have more of a rough and tumble audience, is that let's face it, Starbucks charges as much money for a cup of coffee with no alcohol, and there's no stripper pole, and they have people lining up for this thing. And oftentimes they're buying something that has a whiff of coffee in it, but essentially it's a milkshake that's $6, $7, $8, $10. And they're doing that, and they're having huge margins. Now there are other places, but think about the fact that right now we could have Jim, Gabe, and John's Coffee Emporium. I mean, how could it lose? And it'll lose because it's not Starbucks, unless we do something dramatically different, unless we figure out how we're going to.
That's where we bring the strippers in.
Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say.
Strippers. That's
where the pole comes in.
That's where the pole comes in.
I mean, in a non-joking way, that concept has already been used. There's these coffee bars that drive through where the girls are wearing bikinis.
Sure.
There you go.
Not that I have ever gone down.
Of course not. Yeah, you heard.
That's just what I heard.
You heard about it.
Exactly.
It was research for your newsletter. Jim, it gets a little, so that to me that's a perfect example of they inhabit and live in a position in the market, and as long as they keep dominating that position, and there are other coffee chains, but there are 25 companies out there right now that we've been able to find that are selling franchises to get you into the coffee business. And that's insane, because wait a second, there's Starbucks and there's Dunkin', not donuts, but they now call themselves just Dunkin'. And soon, since they want to just keep concatenating it, maybe they can just call themselves Duh or something, Dumb. But and then there's Pete's and there's a couple others, but it's hard.
Name 20.
We were talking about this a few days ago, and you told me about that concept, and I thought of it like later that day, and I was thinking, well, I know there's Pete's, which I like, and I know there's Coffee Bean Tea and Leaf, which I really like, but I can't tell you exactly where there is one around my house.
Interesting.
But I can tell you where the 5 Starbucks are around my house that I can get to within about 10 minutes of each one.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, there's one in the Target that's 10 minutes away from me, inside the Target.
Sure.
So there you go.
We were going to stop off at, before we came over to the bunker and lair here, we were going to stop off at a Starbucks. We made it to the lot. There were no parking spaces.
I know the one you're talking about.
Yeah, and we couldn't get in. I mean, no room at the inn. Man.
Exactly.
It is packed.
No, that
to the
one's
rafters.
packed to the rafters with all kinds of people.
So that's positioning, right? That they have so dominated that category that's what positioning is. Yeah. And the reason why that's so important is that if you don't occupy a position that's defendable, then you're in serious trouble.
Right.
And that's the key. That is defendable, right? Can you even though we can see what Starbucks has done, then the failure would be, well, we're going to go out and do our own Starbucks. Well, you can't, because there's already somebody in that position, right? You're going to have to do something different, right? And if it's something different, is it defendable? For example, we can be the coffee house of this street. Maybe this is good enough, right? Well, then our market size is whatever it is, right? But that's why there's still a mom and pop or local, hole in the wall coffee house, right? But they don't go out and start franchises, because that's not their game. Their game is just to dominate that little tiny market, which is fine.
There's a independent coffee house that is relatively close to the bunker, and it's a place I go to from time to time, but not for the coffee, because they have upcoming singer-songwriters there every Friday night.
Yep.
And it's excellent. There's a lot of talent in this area. And I go there to listen to new stuff.
Yeah.
I've gone there to perform.
Cool.
And I go there for the coffee. They don't sell alcohol there. And it's a college crowd.
Cool.
So you meet people that, I've talked to people and what do you do? Oh, I have a podcast. Oh, that's cool. And so I've got people that I've got future guests coming on the show that are singer-songwriters that I met at this thing.
Cool.
So, but I can't meet anybody like that at the Starbucks.
Sure.
But if I want my coffee, I'm going to the Starbucks.
Yeah, interesting.
So that's how it works.
Yeah, and that's where why most businesses fail in the first 5 minutes is they fail the positioning test.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so give me a hypothetical here. If somebody is, let's say I have a business, okay, and I'm trying, let's say I have an idea for a business. What are the things I need to do to test out the idea, like for myself, to see if I have correct positioning?
Well, the first thing that you want to do and we talk about it in the book, but I'll give you a quick overview of it. So what market do you serve? Who are these customers? Who are they going to be? And more importantly, what are their alternatives and choices? Yep. So there's 3 steps, the 3 big mistakes. Is number one is you need to know yourself. That means what you're about, what you're going to do, then you have to know your audience, your market, your consumers. I mean, the most important thing, if you're going to have a hamburger stand, the late great Gary Halbert said, what do you need when you're going to have a hamburger stand? I'm sitting in the audience and people are raising their hand. Great hamburgers, great fries, great shakes, all of that. It goes through all this, and Halbert says you need a starving crowd. Well, you need a starving crowd. You got to know where the starving crowd is. So you have to know who those people are, but then you have to put it in context of who all the competitors are. What's available to you? What can you do or can't you do? Now, Jim, you've been to Las Vegas a bunch of times. No one ever would mistake Caesar's Palace for Link across the street. Come on, man. I mean, no one would ever mistake Bellagio for, downtown Vegas. Well, it's because they have this competitive landscape. So you have to lay out what your competitive landscape is and do that. And let's say 100% of every failure that I'm looking at that I'm trying to do a turnaround. And by the way, often I don't accept them as a client. I'll coach them, but I won't take an intervention. Is that they can't tell me who their competitors are. Yeah. Gabe and I spent 3 days with this couple who poured their life into this business, and he's on his laptop, I'm on mine. We're talking to them. We kick up all these different competitors, and they're sitting there going, I wonder who those people are. Right. Wow, $22,000 a month in overhead, and you don't even know who the hell these people are. Yeah. Now, that's pretty common. So it's know yourself, know who your customers are, and, I guess we can use fancy words. I'm going to build an avatar. Great, build an avatar, but you're not selling to an avatar. Here's what you do. I'm at Freedom Fest last year, Jim. In fact, we're launching the book. We're having fun. And this woman starts talking to me, and she goes, yeah, hey, this is my idea, and my sister and I, we've poured a bunch of money into it. I said, tell me the idea. I sit down, she pitches me an idea. Kind of interesting. I go make 3 phone calls. Make a couple more, make 5 phone calls, come back. 3 of the people I talk to, everybody understands what she's talking about, right? So it is good. That's good, getting confirmation. But these are people who would take out a credit card and buy this. Only 2 of the 5 said they would pay a penny for her services. A penny. The other 3 said, no, I would never pay for that. Well, that isn't a big study, but I said, what is your confirmation bias? Well, her confirmation bias is all of her friends think she's smart. All these other people think she's smart. Everybody's been telling her this is wonderful and they're going to pay this much money. I'm talking to people who don't know a damn thing. I don't care if you have an avatar. Go out there and actually get into that mosh pit. Find out if somebody's going to pay you money to do it.
The theoretical avatar that a lot of business consultants and companies, and I've gone through this with my newsletter publishing. We have our kind of certain avatar for a certain customer that we have, depending on the service that it is, if it's a trading service or if it's a long-term investing service. But the difference that we have with that avatar is we know that customer because we have data because they're the customers that have already bought from us. So they're actually people that have already spent the money, or that in that industry. We have like a good metrics on these people that, we know what kind of open rates we have on marketing pieces and things like that. So we know what they're going to do when they do it. But I've seen other people say, well, this kind of thing is for this particular person. I'm like, well, how many of those are there? And how many of those, we're looking for the kind of the farmer guy who's an independent thinker that has this and that. And I said, well, do you actually know anybody like that? Or is that just your concept of the person? Well, then they didn't know anybody like that. No one, so it wasn't a surprise to me that the idea didn't go very far.
So my revulsion of the word avatar is it makes it sound too highfalutin. Let's get serious. Who is that person across the table from me, and what is their profile that we know? Because the word profile has a negative connotation. But who is this person, and how do we definitize who that person is, which is what you're talking about.
Right.
But see, when you start putting all the trimmings and all the other stuff, and I've seen all this stuff, and they go, yeah, but John, again, because they won't know my background, right? How do you survive in Vegas? By doing prop bets with people. It's because you can walk across a room and pick out somebody who will bet with you. It's not because you're going to go out and talk to everybody and go, hey, let's gather around and let's talk about this. It's putting them on the spot and seeing them take money out and see if they'll bet and they'll do something. So I say to people, listen, I can read people very, very well. And I use that for my clients because I want to know who we are selling to and how that's going to fit. Yeah. But more importantly, what are their alternatives? I blew somebody's mind, and it was, maybe their mind was pretty short to be blown, but I blew their mind when I said, you realize that all of these people that we're going out and looking for, their alternative, our biggest competitor is do nothing. That's our biggest competitor. He's like, what? So guess what? We built an entire campaign where we attack the people who are doing nothing. We just said, listen, forget about all these other guys. This is for the do nothing guys. Now, we started getting business from the do nothing guys because we convinced them that they should do what? Now, I know this is some advanced stuff, and instead of doing nothing, do something.
That's right.
And that's what we wanted to do. Now, those turned out to be different customers, a different profile than all these other people. So I just get a little, I guess if I wanted to stay with my Vegas days where I just took people's money and they left with an experience, as I would be this guy, and we'd be figuring out avatars for people.
Right.
But the thing I always ask the guys who tell me that they're avatar geniuses is I say, tell me how many times you found the avatar and it turned into X number of dollars, because I'm with you. I want to know how many of these people there are. If you're defining a 3-legged tap dancing mule, how many of those are that we're going to go sell to?
Right.
Right?
I mean, these are all difficult, very difficult problems for any business and especially a new concept or a concept that it's probably harder. It's probably easier for a new concept that's relatively like untapped, because then you have a position that's like somewhat unique. But it's probably harder for in the example you use, the coffee thing. But there's a million different coffee type examples, where like somebody goes into a tech area, whatever, like, well, what do you do? I'm a search engine. Okay. Well, why, or something like that, or some kind of piece of software that does something that a lot of other people's software, or even in my industry, and we can talk about this on your show later. There's a lot of people out there with a podcast. There's a lot of people that are personal, like business type gurus, like in your business.
Oh yeah.
Like, you guys, there's a million consultants. If I want to find a business consultant, I can find one, and I can find a million of them, and they all have like big degrees and stuff like that. So actually, let me ask you that.
Jim has a rock out front, and we bumped into it with the car, and a business consultant crawled out. So
there you go. Yeah, exactly. I have big rocks out front.
3 of them. Yeah.
So I've got. That's where I hide all the bodies of people that disappoint me. That's why I'm going to put all my competitors in the podcast world. So here's the question I have for you guys. We all know that almost every field has like a lot of things. If it's a good field, an interesting field, there's a lot of people that are in it.
Obviously.
Okay. Yeah. So, I'm no exception. You're no exception. So what is your positioning? Why are you guys special? Why should someone read this book?
I would say that the reason why they should read the book is that Positioning for the Battle of Your Mind came out in 1981. Mm-hmm. It's been in continuous print since then. It's a very simple concept that most people don't ever do. In fact, there's a lot of other things that have come out that are fads that have come and gone and come and gone and come and gone. And that what this is a logical extension of what Al Reeves and Jack Trout started way back then. They left a bunch of things out. The story of why the book came about is that Gabe and I 2 years ago were sitting in Dallas, and I was describing to him how pivoting worked and how some of these things came about. And he looked at me and said, that doesn't exist in the book. It doesn't, all the things you're talking about. So what we did is we went out and built a system, Position to Win as a system. The book is the first step in this system. Mm-hmm. And in fact, you can go take the entire webinar series, which turned into 35 hours of material for somebody who's really serious about this. But the book is a way to make that first step obtainable. It doesn't matter if you're an individual, if you're a business that's just starting out, you're a well-established business, you're trying to figure out how to get a product launched and not have it fail. The book talks about in concrete steps what you need to do and how you need to do it, and therefore you won't waste a lot of time. Now, most people don't quite understand. It takes you 3 to 5 years to realize it, because that's usually the cycle that you go through before you run out of your money and your family's money and your friends' money and your investors' money.
Well, it also takes about that time, that amount of time too, for you to finally capitulate to yourself that this isn't working.
Wow. That's powerful what you just said, I think.
I think a lot of people, I have sympathy for that, because no one ever did anything good without a lot of persistence and saying, no, I can do this. Yeah. So that's one of the problems that I've seen in all walks of life. Like there's someone, we've seen this, I'm sure you've seen this in the music industry. Yeah. So I saw that, I saw a lot of guys that were very talented, and they're like, I'm going to make it, even though the odds are like 1 in a million that you're going to make it, and, or maybe even worse than that, and then you see other guys that do make it, and they're not as talented, they're not as driven, they're not as you just go, why did that guy make it? But that person made it. Maybe like some things that they did do, or some things it's just not in their control. They're in the right place at the right time. There was a lot of bands I knew that guys from that were from Seattle bands back in the 90s, and they got a deal, and they were not good, but everybody else in that town was getting a deal at the time, so they got a deal.
Sure.
They didn't max it out because they didn't have the skills, but they got a deal. And where other bands in LA at that time were very good, but they just were overlooked. So I think there's a fine line between knowing that you're not doing something right,
totally.
and also realizing that you have to keep on driving through,
absolutely.
because like I said, no one ever did anything without like confronting the obstacles. So do you guys have any kind of insights on how to determine that?
The fundamental problem with the human condition is that, well, you have to decide if you need to dig more, you need a bigger shovel, or you need a ladder to get out of that hole and go to the next thing.
Right.
That is the fundamental
Yes,
question.
that's very good.
When you look at the motivational poster that says, persevere, never give up. If you turn the poster over, you look closely. There's letters that say, well, maybe you need to go do something else if it's not working. And this is the problem. This is essentially the problem. So, and this is why positioning, I believe, is the first strategic step anybody needs to take, because positioning in simple terms is the way in which people organize stuff in their head. That's it. So this is where you need to start. This is where you begin, right? Because in essence, you might think, well, what I need to do is I need to have an objectively better product, right? Well, that sounds good, especially in a very enlightened and in modern age that we live, right? We want objectivity. We are scientists, all of us. We think like scientists. We talk about proof, and we talk about evidence. We talk about all those things. Well, but we're not objects. We are subjects, and so we what we want to know is not what something is, but what something means. Right? And so the problem is, okay, so how much should I do this or that? Well, this is more of an art, more the art of business than the science of it, right? There's no formula, no this, but
there's no exact way to say, okay, well, maybe I'm not doing this, or maybe I need that ladder, maybe I need to because the fact is you probably need to do both at some point in your journey.
Totally, and I think something that we talk about in the program is having the positioning glasses, right? Because you need to be able to see things through the lens of positioning, not through the lens of what you think. We even jokingly did an event in last October, right? Called Shred Your Reality, and we had a little kind of a funny section where we call it the rose color glasses, and we actually brought a set of rose color glasses for everybody, right? And so it's like, well, let's put these on. Okay, so we put them on, and that's when we said, man, my business idea is so great, everything's gonna work out. I don't need to raise any money. Everything, the customer's just gonna be barging through those are all those kinds of things. Which obviously you need enough motivation and you need to be able to sell an idea to yourself for you to actually follow through. So that's good.
But you have to have a certain level of unwarranted optimism to make the business go.
Yeah, many times, even okay, and we were talking about a project that we were kind of started with John, and John said it himself, and I think we have that kind of idea, that kind of mindset. This is looking at it from the positioning side. John asked me, Gabe, how can this fail? Let's think about all the options, all the possible ways in which this is going to fail. Because see, we already sold on this idea because it's our project, obviously.
Right.
So instead of going the confirmation thing, let's generate some cognitive dissonance, some self-generated cognitive dissonance, to try to figure out all the ways in which, what are the things that we are not looking at, and this is difficult, but also this is one reason why you want to get somebody that is outside involved. When people ask me, well, Gabe, what industries have you worked in? And I have a whole bunch of instruments I've worked in, and then maybe perhaps I love it when a potential prospect or somebody who's I'm talking to, they're in an industry that I've never touched, right? So they or that I know less, let's say. They say, well, Gabe, what do you bring to the table? And I said, well, honestly, I bring ignorance. And they're like, that's weird. What do you mean? It's like, yeah, I don't know anything. So I'm going to see things that you do not see.
That's an important thing right there. I love that, because a lot of times people are in an industry They know the product, that they know everything, even like they know all the competitors. That's like you mentioned before. That's a good thing. You know, they know the competitors. They're in the industry. They've been, mover and shaker in that industry for a long time. They're like a big gun, right? Mm-hmm. And they want to start their own gig, right? And they assume that everybody else has the same conviction that what they do is something they need.
Sure.
But most of your customers are going to go, well, what are you all about?
Yep.
Why should I listen? Well, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, let me give you a spin on that. When people know what their competition is, which that can be debatable, but let's pretend, yes, there are some businesses that I've met, and people are, oh yeah, we know our competition. So by definition, when you know what something is, you also know what isn't, right? You might say, look, these are my competition, but there's actually something outside that is actually also competing, but you don't know because these are it, right? And we're involved with a mutual client with John that they're a very traditional business, right? And they have a competition that they don't know about, and that's actually the angle we're approaching that, which is, did you know that there are trucks driving around that do not have your competitor's name on it, but actually your competition? And then what do you mean? Yeah, they say Amazon on them. Did you know that you're all? And they say, no, we sell services. We don't compete with Amazon. Are you sure? Have you looked into what they're doing? Right? And it turns out, and again, there's so many businesses right now that are being touched by Amazon that don't even know. I'm not talking about e-commerce, obviously.
Yeah. There's all kinds of different. I mean, database companies are like, what? Amazon? Yeah, they're the biggest web services company out there. And a lot of people didn't even know that until everybody knew it, know? And so, that's interesting.
And it happens all the time, because what we're talking about when you talk about positioning, we're talking about categories and categorization, right? Because in one extreme, you can think of, okay, so here's how the human mind could work. The human mind could work this way. The brain remembers every little detail about everything, right? Or on the other extreme, the brain doesn't remember anything, right? Well, obviously, both of those things are not true. So which one is it? Well, it's somewhere in the middle. And how does the brain solve that puzzle, right? How does the brain kind of figure out what needs to happen? Well, the brain solves it by categorizing things, like you think about a file folder, right? And so we have categories of things. Well, each of those categories is let's say, and these are categories are mental categories, right? Psychological categories, not industries. Right? If you look up, who's the top player in fast food, then you say, well, McDonald's, right? They have about 17% market share, right? Where is the second player in fast food? Well, it's like Yum Brands. Ask anybody if they know what Yum Brands are, and most people don't know. But if you ask, well, you say KFC, right? And you go, oh yeah, I know what they are. Right. Well, but so that's not a psychological category. That's just somebody's that's picking stock that is figuring that out. But in the mind of the consumer, they go, they're probably sitting there wondering, I wonder why I can't have a Coke inside of a KFC. They haven't figured that out, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But there's no time. There's no time to figure all these things out. Right. So what we do is we have categories, we have things so that we can quickly make a judgment on things, because there's no time to make every possible choice about every possible thing anew.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, it's an information and processing overload kind of thing. There's no way to do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, and that goes for any industry, any business, and so that's what makes the process difficult.
Well, it does, but it doesn't. So here's an interesting thing. When the original book came out in '81, it was dedicated to the fact that we lived in an over-communicated society.
Yeah, in '81.
1981.
Yeah, I don't remember much high-tech communication back in '81.
Yeah, so we'd already passed the threshold. Then you think about where we are today. Right. But when you ask, how do you know when you hit that 3 to 5 point, that realization point, or what we've now dubbed as the day of reckoning?
Day of reckoning.
Right.
It's the day of reckoning, when you have to just say, well,
capitulation day.
Yeah. Well, nobody can spell capitulation, so it's got to be reckoning.
My audience can.
There you
go. They're smart like that.
There you go. Smart and good looking.
That's right. So, just like Gabe.
But the simplest way to know if it's time to pack it up and give up, is are you growing? Are you seeing people resonating with your message? Are people connecting with what you're doing? Do you see that expanding? Most of the time, what I see is businesses that are slowly circulating around the drain and around the drain and around the drain, because they're really not doing those things. They're just treading water. They're struggling with it. We have a client, mutual client, and he's selling telecommunication services. Well, we know that that's a unique thing because there's just like everybody is selling that, I'm sure, and as that thing becomes totally commoditized and more commoditized, is you have to think of what are you going to do? Now, my suggestion to him is, since he has knowledge about how to define how to do these systems, how to set them up, how to train people to utilize them. An average VoIP phone system has, like 40, 50, maybe 100 different features.
Yeah,
well, train people. Maybe that's the way that you're going to do what you're going to do to survive in this market. Because now you've pivoted away from being the guy who's bringing the bucket of water, and now you're telling them what to do with the water.
Right. Yeah, the pivots are, the positioning is virtually endless depending on what kind of industry or whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
And the pivots are endless as well.
Yeah.
Because we have an evolving, every day is different practically, not that you pivot every day, but you have to be willing to, look at that with the positioning glasses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to wrap up this conversation.
Excellent.
So the book is titled Most Businesses Fail in the First 5 Minutes. And it's by John Paul Mendocha and Gabe Bautista, co-conspirators.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell everyone where if someone's listening to this and they say, hey, these guys know what the hell they're talking about, which I consider you both to definitely know. And I really want people that this can apply to check you guys out, because I'm going to do that myself. I hope to one day call you my coaches. So I want people to know where to get a hold of you, how to get the book, what to do next, if they want to call you, if they want to contact you on social media. And of course, I'll put all their links on the website here, my website. But go ahead and tell them exactly.
So you can go to positiontowinbook.com, and there's a description of what we do, and kind of goes through, in a more in-depth, because of your more sophisticated audience. Also, they can go to Amazon, Apple, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and get the EPUB right now.
Okay.
And by the way, we can never have too many 5-star reviews, so that just swing in for that, right?
That's actually quite important. The more reviews and the more better. Like, I've had that on my books.
It's a principle of positioning.
It's a principle of positioning, and also it feels good to get even haters.
Yeah, absolutely.
I tell people, like,
absolutely.
When people send me things like on my newsletters, like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, this and that. I love that, because they're paying attention, they're reading it. You know, and because you can't please everyone. That's another positioning thing. You don't want to be all things to all but everybody, because then you're nothing to nobody.
Exactly. Yep.
And then of course the big date is, depending upon when this runs, is March 17th. Paperback is shipping. And by the way, if they want to get an autographed version of the paperback, they go on to positiontowinbook.com, and they can order the book directly from us. And it's a little old school, but you get it autographed, and if you want us to say happy birthday, Wanda June or whatever, we'll put that in the book and send it out to you.
I like old school.
Yeah.
All right, gents.
Renaissance.
Anything else?
No, I think that's it. They should go to the website. Also, we have I just remembered, we have a positioning quiz that they can take on the website.
I'm interested in taking that quiz.
So you take the quiz and you get a score in your inbox. So and Yep, we're spreading the word of positioning because we believe it is the strategy behind any tactics that you do. If you want to do a podcast, think about your positioning first. If you want to do social media, and we're a team right here with John, right? So John is like we come into a company and John explains to me, okay, so I'm the analog guy, so he does all the sales stuff, all the stuff out there, and I'm the digital guy, right? And so we just kind of met
personal positioning.
So it's all that, but it's all those are tactics. When somebody says, well, you need to write a book, or you need to to do a podcast, you need to use a CRM, so they start citing you tactics and tools and ways of doing things and things. But you start with positioning, because if you have the strategy correct, then everything is much easier. Now, if you already have a business, if you already have something going on, chances are that you need to tweak, not from the techniques, not from the tactics. Not, well, I got a client talking this morning saying, Gabe, I think we need, it's a nonprofit, some digital stuff, who are you aiming at? What are your, and their thing is like 2 paragraphs talking about exactly what you're talking about, Jim, which is they want to be all things to everybody. So I'm sure that there's a customer, there's something that they're actually doing really well, and everybody else kind of like there. But if they were to really drill down in that position, they'll be able to do that much better.
Who can you sell to your product that can't live without it? You want to find all those people out there.
You definitely want to
can't
find
live without
them.
it. Okay, so I'll just close on this. Thank you guys for coming here. Thank you for enlightening all of us. I really appreciate it. It's been an excellent episode, and it's been fun getting to know both of you too, because you're both great guys. So thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Jim.
All right,
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.